This is the best panel of the day because we have very smart people and we have cool video, and it's going to be more fun to watch than just people blabbing about, I don't know, media or whatever they're going to be talking about over there. I think anybody, I'm a native Californian, and I think anybody who was of a certain age here has ties to aerospace and defense, and we're going to talk about how it's being reborn here and what the future is, where the most potential is, and what the hurdles are. So much private money is partnering with NASA. NASA has poured into the industry as well. You've got Richard Branson, Elon Musk, Paul Allen, Jeff Bezos. I was at the Space Symposium in Colorado last month where Bezos said he thinks space exploration will save Earth. It's not so much a matter of leaving Earth, but saving Earth and perhaps outsourcing a lot of the things that pollute the planet, which is very interesting. We're talking about what is interesting in low Earth orbit, the moon, asteroids, Mars, tourism, space hotels, which are being built in Las Vegas, of course, mining. And at the end of this century, I think we may look back on where we are now the way the aviation industry looked back on the Wright brothers at the end of the 20th century. So we're going to talk about what the potential is for California and what the challenges are, but I want to kind of set the table first with a video from Virgin Galactic.
Humans have managed to learn so much about the universe in such a relatively small time frame compared with the
Space is saving lives today. It is making my life better and your life better and everyone else's life better. It's informing the technologies that we use every day, to the food that we eat, to the medical
Taking more and more passengers out into space will enable them and us to look both outwards and back, but with a fresh perspective in both directions.
Together, we can make space accessible in a way that has only been dreamt of before now. And by doing that, we can truly bring positive change to life on Earth.
I hope by the time my kids are ready to go into space, we've changed our global culture to recognize that space is where we belong and the Earth is something that needs to be a little better protected.
We need more and more people to realize how fragile our planet is, how there's not much around us. This is it.
Virgin Galactic is developing Launcher One, designed to become the lowest cost per flight private satellite launch vehicle.
After all, small satellites can't change the world if they are stuck here on the ground.
The fact that more people have signed up to experience space with Virgin Galactic than have ever been to space before is thrilling. And the knowledge that we must repay their support by making space travel affordable and safe is humbling. But it also inspires us on a daily basis.
This is interesting. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. So these are great jobs. We're not just talking tourism, we're talking about satellite launching. Everybody wants these jobs. The Florida Space Coast has come alive again. Same thing outside New Orleans. They're building a spaceport in New Mexico. Jeff Bezos is doing things in West Texas and Seattle. How do we keep these jobs? I'm going to show you 3 quick slides. California has about 25% of the U.S. aerospace development market, 25% just in the state. We're a close second to Virginia defense spending, but let me show you slide 3. It shows you how critical defense spending is to Southern California in particular, $23 billion between LA and San Diego. Slide 4 shows that we're not at the same workforce we were a dozen years ago, though I would argue that drop would be more dramatic if not for these new private ventures, particularly SpaceX here in Hawthorne. And slide 5 kind of surprised me. It's all about satellites, 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 satellites. And of course, everyone wants to come up with new satellites. Orbital ATK is even coming up with a satellite which can move around and fix other satellites. So we talk about tourism and rockets. Satellites, in the meantime, in California are a huge deal. Everyone on the stage has experienced failure because space is hard, but I'm also going now to briefly introduce them and then start with the questions, and I hope to save 10 minutes for questions at the end. We have George Whitesides, the CEO of Virgin Galactic and the Spaceship Company. Next to me here, from the very distant, is Jacob Van Ziel, the Associate Director of Project Formulation and Strategy at JPL. At the other end, from the very street level view, we have Kelly Johnson, who is the president of Ace Clearwater Enterprises, where they make things. 200 people in California actually make things. And next to me is Jen Simpson, who is the Senior VP of Strategy and Business Development from Aerojet Rocketdyne, a former Boeing, and they're making engines, and they're both in Northern and Southern California and other places. A quick question to kick things off. George, I'll start with you. What is the most exciting opportunity for your company in California and for the industry generally, and what is the biggest challenge you face here?
Well, I think the most exciting thing for us is that we're going to be doing a lot of flights from California, and that California has sort of become the center of the new space world. You know, you look at entrepreneurial efforts both in terms of new start companies and in terms of established companies that are trying to do things in new ways. And California is going to be the place where a lot of this stuff happens. The Bay Area has become a center for small satellite and startups, and Southern California is the center for launch stuff, as well as obviously having JPL. We're going to be launching dozens, eventually hundreds of small satellites from the California coast, which is just, I think, pretty exciting.
From where? From Vandenberg, or from, where's that plane going to take off?
We're going to launch from Mojave and fly it right out over the Pacific Ocean. And the way the geography of basically the American hemisphere is shaped is it's a really good place to launch things into polar orbits, which is one of the key orbits for these new commercial space companies. I'm going to say that something that probably other people say in terms of the biggest challenge is its workforce. You know, it's a very competitive time in workforce. For the workforce. If you're a young aerospace engineer, I don't think there's a better time than it's been for a long time, because you're going to get a great job at a bunch of different places. And so producing more of those folks and creating living situations that make them want to be in the places where that activity is happening is probably our biggest challenge.
What are you doing right now? What are you building right now in Mojave?
So we're building a spaceship in Mojave, and we're building a satellite launch vehicle in Long Beach.
And when will the first satellite launch maybe happen? And when will the first tourists finally go up?
We hope to do the first satellite launch, the first test flights, sometime in 2017. And we're going to be starting the test flight program for the next spaceship shortly. And we'll see how long that test flight program goes, but hopefully we'll be able to start flying our roughly 700 customers for that pretty soon.
I do have a question. Have you had any cancellations because there was a tragedy, there was a fatality?
Yeah, we had about a couple dozen folks ask for their money back, but we're actually almost up to where we were before. Given that we had about 700 people, I think the group is remarkably loyal to what we're trying to do.
Jacob, let me ask you, what are you doing right now at JPL? What's the most exciting potential for California and the greatest challenge?
Well, you know, as you know, we do first-of-a-kind things at JPL. We don't produce things in a production line fashion. So we have a couple of very interesting and exciting projects. Of course, the next big one to Mars in 2020, which is a follow-on to the one that we landed in 2012, but this time we'll carry instruments to look for signs of past life on Mars. And then we're doing studies on...
you mean, what did you say? Signs of what?
Of past life on Mars. You know, if you go back just about less than 10 years ago, maybe 10 years or so ago, we had no real evidence there was even water on Mars at any point in time. We sent those two little rovers in 2004 that landed there, and they determined and gave us conclusive proof that there was water on Mars at one point in time. So then we sent another one there to look for whether the conditions were ever such that life could have existed. That was Curiosity that landed in 2012. And of course, very quickly we determined that, yes, the conditions were indeed such that life could have existed. In fact, there was water for many thousands of years, and we probably would have been able to drink that water. So now the obvious next step is to send a rover there and look for if we can find any signs of past life that may have existed
like
on Mars.
Matt Damon or something
like
that.
Matt, like Matt, to see if we can find Matt. You know. So that's of course a key one, and that's probably our biggest single project going on at the lab at the moment.
And do you build the stuff there?
You know, that's an interesting question. People always think that we build everything at JPL. Yes, we integrate things at JPL. So we build some things at JPL, but most of the things we actually use, we buy from industry. More than 50% of the work, of the money that we get from NASA is actually spent outside of JPL in industry, buying pieces. You know, we're a federally funded research and development center, and we live by the motto that if there is a supplier in industry, then we shouldn't be doing it. We should buy the things from industry, and that's what we do. So we buy a lot of things. So you see the rover in the end, and it says, you know, everybody cheers as JPL and so on, but there's many companies all over this country, actually, that contributed to that rover.
Well, this is a perfect transition to Kelly, because you are one of the companies who, what do you make and who are your customers and how many employees do you have?
So we are a third generation family-owned business headquartered in Torrance, California. We have 200 of the best men and women working in our company supporting the aerospace industry. We don't have our own proprietary product. We build to our customer specifications. And I hope at some time in the future we'll be building for George as well. Our customers are all the OEMs, you know, Boeing, Lockheed, GE, Pratt Whitney, all the big boys.
You mentioned
SpaceX
too. You're doing something for the Falcon 9 Heavy?
Yes, we are. And we compete with them for talent as well. And we are a supplier to them, and we're proud to be. Our roots started actually with Aerojet. My grandfather moved after the Korean War, moved the family from Oklahoma to California. He was a welder by trade and got a call from a friend at Aerojet to bid on an engine igniter for a rocket. It was a small screen assembly at the time, 13 cents a piece, and Ace Welding was born on the spot. And over time, we sort of evolved to be a fully integrated shop where our core competencies now are in the forming and the welding of exotic materials, but we possess all types of processes under one roof in 3 locations. I'd like to say that probably the most exciting thing that I see happening in our industry right now is sort of the intersection of technology and manufacturing coming together at the same time. And that gives me a lot of hope and excitement for our future. You know, high performance computing and modeling and simulation and additive manufacturing has all been accessible to the big guys. And now it's accessible to you know, small companies like mine, and these technologies are real game changers. I would say our biggest challenge is finding the talent we need to compete. And long before the recession, we could see the writing on the wall that of the 200 employees at Ace Clearwater, 75 of them fall in the ranges of the ages of 50 to 65. So there's going to be a huge brain drain. And, you know, our society has created a culture where, you know, you feel that everyone has to go to a 4-year college or university, and if you don't, you got a big L on your forehead as a loser, and that's simply not the case. That there's really great careers that exist in manufacturing. We need to change the perception. We need to work with our educational partners. We got to get the public behind us, because they're really exciting careers. And I feel incredibly privileged to be on this stage with these rock star rocket surgeons, you know, I mean, because we really are the nuts and bolts of, you know, of manufacturing and aerospace in particular.
Real quickly, you have several job openings and you're competing.
Oh my golly, we always have jobs.
If somebody was, you'd say go to LA Trade Tech and get a welding degree.
Yeah, you bet. I mean, they still, once they join our organization, they'll still have to go through the certification so they can be aerospace quality certified in order to weld. But at any given time, we have job openings. And right now, we have 14 openings. And it takes us about 75 days to fill those positions, and these are positions, you know, throughout the organization. It costs us about $5,000 per hire. This year we've hired 14 people. We still have 14 positions open, but we hired 14. We've only been able to retain 5 of them, of those 14. So it is ongoing. Because they're not trainable. And a lot of people think, oh, manufacturers, you just don't want to pay for the talent that's out there. That's simply not the case. No one in any of our companies are making minimum wage. right? These are entry-level or high-paying jobs to begin with. We all recognize as our industry starts moving towards more mass customization and not so much of the assembly line, that we need to train. Everyone is going to do in-house training, but a lot of these folks just simply are not trainable. I mean, the inside joke at our company is once we've made an offer to someone, they've come in, they've done their pre-employment physicals and all of that. When Monday rolls around when they're supposed to start, it's like, did they show up? How many of them can pass the drug tests? You know, so these are chronic
or how many
problems
shop
that we
that
have.
offer around to another shop in town?
Well, that happens because, as we say, all of us are competing for the same talent, and that's exactly what happens.
We'll talk more about that and about in California in particular. But Jim, before we talk to you about Aerojet Rocketdyne and what is exciting and challenging for you right now, there is a video from the company which I'd like to show first.
Status check. Go Atlas. Go center. Go L55.
T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. Go for main engine start. 3, 2, 1.
Wow, USA,
Wow.
USA.
Yeah, that's like a movie.
What is the most, obviously the AR-1 engine is, but also crucial, it's fighting to get into the new United Launch Alliance rocket, although Congress gave you more money, so you have the politics there. But you also just got a new NASA contract for a new space propulsion system. What's the most fascinating thing in California and your greatest challenge?
Well, actually, you saw a lot.
Yeah.
But our greatest, let's see, so there's multiple things going on. I think the biggest challenge, and it's always one of the biggest challenges, is how do we get the cost down? You know, as this is rocket science. I mean, the rocket equation hasn't changed. Unfortunately, physics hasn't changed. But cost demands to enable space to really be viable has changed. And so how do we get the cost down on things that have traditional equations to them? And how do we do things, actually, I mean, like what George's doing on Virgin Galactic and others? And how do we drive the cost down to make space more affordable, more usable? And part of that is some of the things that we're doing in manufacturing right now. And part of the excitement that we're looking at, believe it or not, is in the manufacturing area. It's in additive manufacturing. Our ability to basically use laser jet printers, it's not really a laser jet printer, but just deal with it. But that actually spews material in a form that others you couldn't ever build before. It's helped us do things in hypersonics. It's helped us do things in supersonics. It's reduced the cost of our engines to 50% in some areas. So it's a dramatic way of how do we improve our manufacturability to be able to provide our engines that really are critical for boost. And it is rocket science. The AR-1 is absolutely my biggest concern because it's not sold yet. The good news is, as you said, Congress has given us $536 million, by the way, as a private partnership. And
right,
so,
I know you put in your own, but that's $536 million
right.
from us. But you put in, yes.
260 of ours.
Yes.
And, but the point of the matter is that you asked about public-private partnerships, and it's not just exclusive to the new space world. Commercial crew for NASA is a public-private partnership. Cargo is another example. And these OTAs, what they call other transfers, I'm going to fail miserably on what OTA stands for, but effectively it's a public-private partnership between the Air Force and ourselves. And so they're working. They're starting to evolve. There are ways that the government and commercial sector get to work together and hopefully provide more competitive products. It's still a learning experience. I'm not going to argue that, but it's an approach, and it's an approach that seems to be functioning reasonably well right now.
I would say for those, to the sort of the traditional model of space has been NASA contracts out with Boeing or Lockheed or whoever, and they build something for NASA. NASA pays for it, NASA owns it. Satellite launches are different, where you'd have a launch business on the side, but there were two companies they had to merge to do because there wasn't enough business to support that. So the old model is NASA contracts, buys it, takes it from you. The new model is basically NASA contracts out, gives you a lot of seed money to get you up and running. Then that's supposed to lower the cost for the taxpayers long term because they're only renting this, but the company gets to keep the product that it creates. I've oversimplified, but I think that's the basic idea. Right. So,
there's one thing I would add: the principle of competition. So is crucial. I was chief of staff at NASA for the early part of the Obama administration, and I think one of the key things that was discussed was the idea of you can't make a market, but to the extent that you can maintain multiple entities within a market, you preserve the ability, you encourage innovation, and you preserve competition, which is sort of one of the things that makes our country great, right? Like, we're good competitors. And when that competition flows away, then there's less incentive for cost or innovation or things like that. And so I think one of the things that's been great about the last few years is that you have seen competition, particularly in some of these segments, and the results, I think, speak for themselves. It's not a one-to-one correlation, but the fact of the matter is knowing that there's this other group out there that's trying to beat you is going to make you try to do things cheaper and try to come up with some new thing like reusability or whatever. And that's a really encouraging trend in the aerospace industry.
Yeah, reusability is fascinating, but what it seems to me it works for low Earth orbit, satellite, that sort of thing, but you're not going to reuse the rocket you send to Mars. Like NASA's not going to reuse an SLS, most likely, because it's just, you're not using it enough. What do you need to reuse it for? To reconfigure it to make it reusable and to add all that extra fuel just doesn't.
I think you have to look at a different mindset. Reusability actually doesn't just necessarily mean Earth to some kind of orbit or some type of transfer position. It also means that you could have in place basically stages that could be ran by solar electric propulsion or other things that actually could transfer your payload from that first stage that might be going back to Earth to actually stationed in space somewhere in low Earth orbit or someplace, and actually transferring to a different orbit and going back and forth. So there is different types of reusability.
Wow, you just blew my mind.
I know.
So like a second level of, like a sort of
exactly.
Another platform out there for
a transfer, or it's basically a transfer stage.
Yeah. Wow. Could we build that here?
We're building solar electric propulsion that actually would be utilized on something like that.
Do we need to worry about the Chinese and the Russians? Because the Russians have an excellent record. And somebody who's an old hand in the space industry told me that the Russians can still do things with metallurgy that we cannot. They both have their financial challenges. How much are we really at risk of losing our superiority?
I think many people would say that we're at a competitive crisis right now. And if you look at the structural cost difference that the United States has compared to its 9 major trading partners, is about 17%. And then you compile that by being in the state of California. So I think when we're talking about competition, whether it's the best, the fastest, or the cheapest, we have a real challenge on our hands there. And these are all self-imposed. I mean, no other countries are telling us to have the highest corporate tax rate in the world, and other things. So why don't we got to find a way to undo it?
Why do you stay in California? I mean, you could go to Texas, you could go to Florida.
I stay in California because it's my home. I was born here, and life is not just about your job. It's about your family and your friends and your contacts and your roots. And so, you know, we kind of have that opinion that, oh, not us, we'll show you. You know, and it makes us tougher. And we like to say, so I have so many colleagues across the country that have manufacturing organizations in different states. They say, how in the heck do you do it? Well, this is all I know. So I guess maybe ignorance is bliss that way because we found a way to figure it out. But that doesn't mean that it's right.
But does it, you also said something along the lines of it being close to your customer helps.
Absolutely.
In other words, if they were to outsource something to...
I think one of the most positive things here in California is that we have such a strong ecosystem for the supply chain. I mean, we still have suppliers that do anodizing and heat treating and shot peening and things like that that don't exist. That kind of ecosystem has not been replicated anywhere else in our country. I would say maybe, you know, eastern southern part of the country perhaps is starting to, but once that migrates somewhere else, my customers are going to go where the most robust supply chain and infrastructure exists to do their business. And my success depends on my customer's success. And it has given us a competitive advantage to be in close proximity with our customers. As a supplier, starting off building just simple components and then gradually evolving into more complex assemblies, it helps us to be able to work concurrently with our customers in close proximity. Yes, this is a global economy. Yes, we can do things different than we've done them in the past. But for us and the work that we do, it gives us a competitive advantage to be close to them. And you look now what's happened to Southern California or California in general. SpaceX is headquartered here, but what other large OEM aerospace companies are headquartered in California?
They're all gone.
They're all gone.
Well, I don't know about that. I mean, if you look at El Segundo, there's Boeing, Northrop Grumman.
Right, but
they're not headquartered.
Headquarters for space, they are.
Oh, okay. Well,
Space.
I tend to think of Virginia, Maryland, that sort of thing. But
You're talking about the corporate headquarters for these companies
Yes.
that are $100 billion. If you look, though, in Southern California, you've got Northrop Grumman, roughly about $8 billion. That's right here in Southern California. You've got Boeing Network and Space Systems, effectively another $8.5 billion business that's stationed here. There is a lot of space business that is still here that resides. Yes, it's not all of the corporate, but by the way, the $100 billion corporate Boeing, for example, a majority of it is in Seattle, Washington, not Washington, D.C. or in Chicago.
It's more symbolic. You
well,
know,
I mean, and where are the most jobs? I think that's, and to speak to that, one thing I liked about SpaceX is they repurposed an old Boeing facility, and you've done something similar, true? You've taken an old, abandoned defense plane or aerospace.
Yeah, we have a location that's at the north side of the Long Beach Airport, and what's great about the history of Long Beach is, of course, that it's been a site for all kinds of aerospace manufacturing over the years, and the site that we have a new building on top of that site, but where that used to be was where the Douglas Aircraft Company built all these old airliners, and in fact, just on the other side of the Long Beach Airport is the C-17 plant, which just got closed this past summer, and so they're very encouraged in a way that we're going to start building satellite launch vehicles there, and it's sort of a new recycling of that.
And you get
area.
like free rent for. I mean, I'm just trying to figure out what else is going to go in there. So please stay here, and you don't have to pay rent for ever.
You know, honestly, the main reason we moved to that area was because of people. You know, it's sort of the area. You know, you're in between this big corridor that stretches up to probably El Segundo not El Segundo, up where you are, Canoga Park on the north side, going all the way down to the southern beaches. You know, and Long Beach is sort of in the middle of that. And the reality is, aerospace engineers don't need to move, right, if they live in Southern California. And so, but if they have a cool job, some other opportunity, they might go to a different company, but they don't really want to move their kids, you know, to a different place if they don't have to. And so that's why we went to Long Beach.
I think that one of the important aspects that you brought up is why California. California has more engineers than any other state, especially even in the aerospace area. Where there's in the Silicon Valley area, there's roughly 40,000. In Los Angeles, there's 70,000. I mean, there's a lot to go.
But what's the median age?
It actually, believe it or not, is it's a bimodal type of thing.
Right, it's here and here.
Yeah, and actually, by the way, that's not news. Unfortunately, in the days of yore, when I actually was a young engineer, which was, you know, they had, I think that they still had
slide rules,
horses and buggies. But the fact of the matter was that when I came in, that they thought, oh my God, there's this huge trough between us 20-somethings and the 45 and 50-year-olds. I thought it was a huge advantage in that they gave us more responsibility than we ever deserved at a much younger age. And I think you're starting to see that evolution now.
Happening,
and
yeah.
so when you see that kind of evolution, especially with the new generation of people that it has to be done quickly, it has to be done now, it's a radical departure from the way that space has always been done. Space has always been process-based, requirements-based. And what George and others are doing, it's an evolution of product-based. Product-based means that I'm going to take advantage of the commercial off the shelf. I'm going to take advantage of Moore's Law, which improves all of the electronics, et cetera, rapidly. And what you're starting to see is space evolving at a much more rapid pace. And it's because of this bimodal effect that you're starting to see that, because you do, believe it or not, need a few old, excuse my language, farts to be able to kind of say, hey, we've tried that a few times. You may not want to do that, but you're on the right track or something. Or maybe you have them because it's like, I'm sick of hearing this person. Maybe they want to do something different, and maybe they do something more innovative. The point of the matter, though, is this is not a new phenomena. It's a phenomena that's been in aerospace forever, and it's a healthy one. And I think right now, because of the way that things have been going, where we went from an industrial age to now an information age, I think it's a radical departure from what we're going to be seeing in aerospace.
I want to talk to you about recruiting and brain drain, and brain attitude. How do you get people to come work at JPL? But before we do that, because NASA has a bigger budget, Congress is even giving NASA more than the president asked for, and I'm hoping you get some of that out here in California. But before we do that, I do want to show this video from JPL.
JPL has this tremendous tradition of being the first to do many things.
I've never worked on anything here that's been done before.
We have a fundamental human desire to learn about the universe in which we live. Everything we do here at JPL is tied to that.
The robots that we're building here go where nobody's been, and they're going to be discovering things about our universe that affect our understanding of what's going to happen here on Earth.
To recognize that we're doing science inside the solar system, outside the solar system, science focused back on Earth.
I don't know what can be more exciting than creating the science, creating the knowledge, creating the technologies that will be necessary to finish the journey.
JPL builds the tools for exploring space.
Robotic exploration of the solar system, that's our purpose, and I think we do that very well.
We are exploring space to the benefit of the species. It shows you what a privilege it is for us to get to work on these problems.
Sign me up. So as students graduate Caltech or Harvey Mudd or USC or UCLA or wherever, how do you compete for that talent so that they don't go work for Apple or Goldman Sachs?
Well, you know, we have the same problem everybody else has. It's not easy to find talent, and particularly to keep talent from the younger generation. But the answer lies in that video. We know we cannot compete necessarily with the salaries and things like that that these folks can make from, say, an Apple or a Google or someplace like that. So we have to offer them something different, which is they can work on something that they cannot do anywhere else. And that is the kind of person that we attract. We've been very successful at hiring a lot of relatively young folks. So if you look at our demographics, we are significantly younger than the rest of NASA. But it's basically the offer of being able to do something for the first time that nobody else has ever done before. That's what brings people to JPL, and that's what keeps people like me at JPL.
And you came what, in 1982 to stay for 9 months? Is
Yes,
that what it was?
yes.
What is your perspective? You're a native of Namibia. What is your perspective of American space superiority and commitment to it, and what you see as the greatest threat to it?
Look, I think the U.S., I'm an example of this. Anybody can come here, and if you contribute, this is the place where you want to be. And the opportunities are there if you want to contribute. And we see this all over JPL. We have about close to 25% of the folks at JPL were not born in the United States. But it's the opportunity to do things here that you cannot do back in your home country that keeps people here. I know there's lots of other places where people can do space exploration, but anywhere you go in the world, people still hold the U.S. as the standard. Everybody wants to be part of the U.S. space program. I mean, these folks know that. And so it's always interesting to me when I go to other countries that have space programs and we give a talk there, how many students line up and ask me, how can I come to JPL, how can I come to the United States? Because we are still the place where everybody wants to be.
If we pivot to the defense side, then that creates even more of a challenge because you have to be a U.S. citizen to work on, if you're at Skunk Works or wherever. When I was at the Space Symposium last month, I guess it was in Colorado, the head of the Air Force Space Command said that the U.S. does not have the ability right now to fight a battle in space or from space. Are we doing anything about that? Should we be thinking about that? Right? They're starting to think about it now, just to be ahead of everyone else.
Well, so you asked earlier about China and Russia, and part of the whole aspect of what we call the third offset is the real issue there. And the third offset is effectively, what it means is it's what do we do to offset potential advantages or disadvantages we may have against our potential foe. And so what we're looking at there is what do we do relative to the Chinese and others that potentially have threats that are starting to become emerging much more rapidly than we've ever had before. In fact, in every one of the offsets, first offset, second offset, we've had an incredible advantage.
What does that mean, just briefly?
Oh, I'm sorry. What it means is that every so many years, the government actually looks at approaches to how do we make sure that we have a defensive advantage over our potential foes. And so what do we do, whether it be build up more military force, more airplanes, et cetera. In the New World Order, what's happening is we're starting to see, because of open sourcing, good enough, et cetera, you're starting to see our potential enemies having much more capability. And what we're looking at is, actually we're looking at the Silicon Valley, we're looking at how do they do the speed of innovation, how can we continually do the speed of innovation to enable us to be able to be protected in the next series of potential issues, et cetera. And so what we're taking advantage of is the theory of microcosm, which is what they're looking at as far as small satellites. We're looking at how do we take advantage of Moore's law. How do we actually take advantage of placing multiple bets like a investment banker might do, or a venture capitalist, to say what are the things that we want to put our money on. So because we don't have all of the answers yet, what you effectively have to do is say, I'm going to bet on multiple different approaches to see which ones might be the ones that provide us benefits going forward. So hence why the government is actually putting in an area in the Silicon Valley, California, to look at how do we do innovation more rapidly? How do we do these types of things in a much quicker way to be able to create that speed of innovation to enable us to be protected in the New World Order.
But don't you find some resistance in recruiting there because security, defense, fear of government, or distrust of government?
You're starting to see more and more of emergence of, I'll say, commercial off-the-shelf activities. In fact, part of the whole key here is that you're starting to see things that actually, why the speed of innovation in space is occurring more and more is we're taking commercial items and trying to make them somewhat space worthy so that we're able to use those things more quickly. Instead of having the last or 2 generations behind electronics because you have to have space qualified stuff for 15 years, you're now looking at stuff saying, no, I'm going to take the latest iPad, Intel chip, whatever, and I'm going to put that in space, and yeah, it's only going to last 2 or 3 years, but I don't care because I'm going to renew it in 2 to 3 years. So this whole different mindset is starting to show things, and so you're starting to see where not necessarily U.S. citizens or something are actually developing stuff that could be used for military applications.
What could California do to make your business better? I mean, I love the fact that you're going to do some launches. The more launches out here and the fewer launches in Florida makes me happy. Although launches in Florida are pretty darn cool.
We'll
But
probably do some launches.
I love this whole idea of a plane going up. But you also have a spaceport in New Mexico you guys want to use. So what can California do, starting with you, George, to make you want to do more, to expand, to hire?
You know, we're pre-revenue. Taxes will eventually be an issue. That will be a good day when taxes are more of an issue for our company. And so that is certainly something that we'll be thinking about. You know, one of the things that is sort of particular, well, maybe it's not particular, but it's sort of important for us is thinking about the whole liability regime. States that have a particular interest in space have passed state-level laws that essentially protect manufacturers from certain types of liability. And
we don't have that?
We don't have as robust as other states do. So, for example, New Mexico and Florida and Virginia have passed stronger versions of that than we have in California.
I mean, so that I understand, so that if something goes terribly wrong, you're not put out of business, you're not bankrupted by it?
Yeah, exactly. And you know, I mean, it's all done in a pretty transparent way. So, you know, it's just an area that right now California is behind on, and you know, it does influence. There's this old saying that like. This isn't really true, but amateurs talk about rockets and professionals talk about insurance. And, but you know, like the point being that there's sort of underlying issues, whether it's insurance or regulation or something, that are sometimes, you know, pretty important to the underlying operation. And so that's something that the legislature could consider.
Jacob, what would you like to see done? What would make it better for JPL?
You know, I think we are somewhat less affected by being in California in the sense that we're a not-for-profit organization, so we don't have all of these other issues with the taxes and so forth. For us, I think you know, the only issue, and there's not anything the state can do about it, is part of the reason we lose people early in their careers is when they start having families, it's expensive to live in this area. And so they move typically back to closer to where their folks are and things like that. But that's something, I don't think there's anything much that we need from the state in order to be successful.
Are you hiring right now?
We're always hiring because, you know, even at a great place like JPL, you do have some attrition. People come and people go. So
I mean, what's the average? Do you know off the top of your head, what's the churn, like 5 years?
Well, let me put it this way, these folks, I'm sure they will tell you the same thing. We lose more people early in their career than we do in the later part of the career. But we're very lucky that our attrition rate is very low, 2 to 3%, that's all.
Oh, wow, okay.
So,
George, are you hiring?
Yeah, yes.
What do you hire, what roles?
All kinds of roles, engineering, manufacturing, you know, support services. You can go to our website.
Excellent.
We have a variety of positions open right now, highly paid.
Jim, what could California do for you? And are you guys hiring?
The answer is yes, we are hiring.
I guess everybody. I just have the wrong degree.
Actually, we're hiring in your area as well.
All right, we'll talk if the CNBC thing doesn't work out.
I think that part of it is in the politics area and the ease of doing business in California and the ability to vote a certain way. There are certain, just as George said, there are certain states that are much more, I'll say, aerospace friendly than California. You know, there's a whole areas that are more friendly. Southeast United States is an area that wants to focus on aerospace and other things, and so they're providing tax benefits and other things to have people move to that area.
And yet you don't move.
No, because well, I'm a native as well. Okay. But actually, it's not that I ever didn't want to move or I was not willing to move. Fortunately, the jobs were always here, and they were always exciting. And that's what I think that keeps people in California is we do have an incredible amount of exciting jobs still in aerospace here. And that are we going to be able to compete on a manufacturing perspective? Well, I mean, perfect example is that Elon Musk is actually able to compete at the lowest, and he's the low-cost provider right now in Hawthorne. The low-cost provider in large satellites is in Palo Alto. I mean, it's counterintuitive to say that two of the low-cost providers are coming, and manufacturing are coming from California. But that also shows the complexity of the systems that we're building, and that you need the talent levels that are in California right now.
Kelly, what could California do? I mean, I know you have, what is it, $9,000 per employee for regulatory compliance?
For regulatory and labor compliance, it costs us a little over $9,000 per employee. So you think about, we have 2.5 people working in our HR department. We comply with more than 43 labor laws, and we have one labor attorney on the outside. And then we have an environmental compliance officer in our organization. You think that's weird for a company that's only 200 employees, but we also have...
That's a full-time job.
That's a full-time job. So we also have 2 environmental consultants and 1
well, there's another degree
environmental attorney as well. And so the cost of compliance is huge.
You have an environmental attorney?
Yes.
On staff or outside counsel?
Outside.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Outside.
Okay.
And 2 environmental consultants. So I think, you know, the regulatory burden is just crushing us. And manufacturers have led the way in regulatory compliance, whether that's, you know, sustainable manufacturing or energy efficiency, implementing those types of technologies, eliminating the waste. So we all live and work in our communities, and I'm tired of being villainized, that we're there just to take advantage of this wonderful planet and then move on and destroy something else. So, because that's just simply not the case. So I think that, you know, when you look at how the process is established, we need to do a better job of approaching these regulations with a common sense approach, where there should be more rigor and transparency in the cost analysis, and there should probably be a sunset review so we could go back and look at these regulations to see if they're redundant or if they're living up to their promise, if they're doing what they were intended to do. Too often these regulations create unintended consequences. So I think, you know, we need to be able to work with our elected officials to try to create a more competitive business environment here in California.
Is there that sense in Sacramento? Do the people in Sacramento
I think
care?
There's an awareness. I think there's starting to be an awareness. You look at what the mayor's office is doing. They have an initiative called Make in LA. There's this whole makers movement that's occurring now, and this renaissance that's going on, and I think we really need to tap into that. I think our elected officials are also recognizing the value of manufacturing jobs.
We were, to elaborate on that, we were very encouraged that Senator Feinstein and several others of the California political community actually requested the Department of Defense to investigate the stability of the solid rocket motor business as well as the liquid rocket motor business, to make sure that things, you know, from a California perspective, are we going to have that type of business? Are we going to be able to keep that type of business?
But how much should we, as a taxpayer, how much should I support continuing something that, just to keep, you know, keep it alive, keep the technology alive and the workforce trained?
Well, I don't think you should ever keep anything just alive. I think that it's got to have meaning, it's got to have capabilities that are beyond what other people have. But should you support it such that that business would not leave to go to another state? Possibly, because other states are when you talk about competition, there's competition between states to have your business there. Of course. And so when you say, do I want to have that business in California? Do I want to have those jobs in California? Do I want to have that highly educated workforce in California to be able to do certain things, to be able to make a more healthy California? That's the decision that needs to be made, and that's the decision that we think, quite frankly, I say that, yes, we want to keep that type of capabilities.
I think my feeling is, if you have made it in California, you're not going to leave. The challenge is getting somebody from somewhere else to start a business here or to move here.
I don't think that's true. I don't think that's true at all. I think that, frankly, if we're, as George talked about, competition is the name of the game. And if somebody is going to be more competitive because they're providing a similar product, maybe not as good of a product, but good enough, and it's at a different price point because they're in a different environment as far as dollars per hour, et cetera, you may have to consider moving because you want to maintain your competitiveness.
Do we have time for questions yet? If anybody has questions? We have one up in front. How are we doing on time? Sorry, I haven't paid. Oh, we got 10 minutes.
Yeah, we're good. Hi, I'm Brian Kessler. So I guess I have a couple questions. So aerospace, but we haven't talked much about domestic flight equipment. And we actually are currently in project with Lockheed at Skunk Works, where we have just contracted making the first 12 hybrid airships.
Oh, I did a story on them. They're amazing.
So we are...
And they're going to need to find a market. You found your first customer. I think it's Branson's former balloon guy.
That's me. So
oh, okay, all right.
I'm the chairman of the board of Straight Line Aviation.
Okay, all right.
I own a venture capital company here, and we've bought 12 of these pieces of equipment to put in use.
They're crazy looking.
So now we look forward to hopefully working with people like you guys who are moving large, bulky equipment that has awkward transportation challenges. And our equipment's going to be made in California. It's going to be made at Skunk Works, which is pretty interesting.
Yeah, the first commercial project, I think, the first commercial aircraft they've ever marketed.
It's the first non-government project that they've ever done. So I guess my question really is about, like, what can we do to bring not just, things that go outside of the hemisphere, but also we can use here. And it's interesting to me because I am now in the middle of saying, all right, how do we bring jobs? How do we get this thing built? How do we find customers to support it? But the truth is, if we get this going, I mean, our first aircraft is only 22 ton, and we have plans to do all the way up to 500 ton. And
just so you know, this is it's like a blimp, but it's also a plane, also a helicopter, and it's humongous for moving cargo around the world.
The first one's the size of a football field, and it moves 22 tons, which is about 44,000 pounds. But it's about 4 truckloads of size because our compartment is much bigger.
And if you shoot it, it won't pop. It won't.
Right. Yeah. We can shoot it with 900 rounds of bullets.
Well, that was my first question.
Right. No. If you shoot it,
and it's helium, not hydrogen.
And it doesn't blow up. And if all 4 engines go out, it stays in the air. But the 500 ton is literally the size and can move freight cross Trans-Pacific to change how we move freight globally. So right now, the reason I got involved is I come from a consumer goods background, and when we move freight trans-Pacific, you either have 2 choices. You can put it on a boat and wait 6 to 8 weeks, or you can air freight it 5 times the cost. This comes in, moves the freight in 2.5 days trans-Pacific at about 1/10 the cost of air freight. So, but all of that is here. And the challenge...
How many jobs do you know? Because it's through Lockheed. Do you know, is everything going to be done at Lockheed?
Everything is being done, well, everything, like someone said earlier that they subcontract out different component parts, but the final assembly is in the Lockheed hangar. To do the 500 ton, we have to build a larger facility. So our 22 ton is in Lockheed's Skunk Works facility right now, right next to where our models are at.
It's out in Palmdale.
In Palmdale, right. And the number of jobs depends on how many. We're targeted to make 650 is what we think the target market is just for the 22 ton, which is, right. Now, if you
That's you believe in this.
I live in it, breathe it every day.
You breathe in the helium. No, 650 is a lot. But your question, I'm sorry.
So my question is, what can we do as a state to help even not just look at aerospace? Because I think aerospace is great, and obviously we have a relationship with Branson and very supportive of their project. But everything has been focused in the last number of years. Here we are now bringing a low-tech, high-tech concept to California.
An old new idea.
An old new idea. But it's very much like Elon Musk, the electric car. I mean, we're really bringing back technologies that have existed, but finding new application for it. So when you talk about $9,000 per person it costs, like, what can we do to help address it? Because as you asked the question, are we going to stay at Skunk Works? And I think the answer is as long as we can afford it, and as long as my side of this is to get the customers, bring them to the table. California's side of it is to make it more attractive just due to the manufacturing. And I'm an Ohio boy, and I come from a Rust Belt manufacturing family, and we want to keep jobs in America. So the challenge becomes, how can we work together to do that?
Your thoughts on that?
I don't know the answer, but I do think that there's a great opportunity for California to sort of think really hard about manufacturing right now, because you see you guys and us and there's this company Icon Aircraft that's trying to create a whole bunch of small aircraft.
And drones. We didn't even talk about drones.
We haven't even talked about drones. But I think that a lot of these companies will be started here. And the question will be, how does California retain them? Because you'll move from a prototype phase where, of course, Lockheed's going to build it, build the first few. But then you're going to move into sort of like how low can I drive the cost down? And you'll go from like that early prototype manufacturing to sort of, okay, say you were to get an order for 100 or 50 or something like that, you'd probably think really hard about where you're going to do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so what could California do to keep that here, keep that in Palmdale or whatever? I don't know all the answers, but I mean, I think there's a great opportunity if the legislature and the governor actually like really focused on that, because this is the place to start stuff.
Exactly.
But the challenge is sort of that ongoing manufacturing line.
And I think there's statistics that show that we get a larger percentage of the startup money here, but then to expand, they're going somewhere else.
And usually offshore?
Not necessarily. Mm-mm.
Did we have another question? All right, I have a final question. No, anyone else? What is aerospace in California going to be looking like in 5 to 10 years? I'm going to start with you, Jordan. That's my final question.
I think if it can be smart about it, it's going to be amazing, right? I mean, if we're building, you say, what is it? Hybrid airships, right? Hybrid airships, and rockets and spaceships and all, I mean, it has the potential to be just incredible.
What do you think? What is Virgin Galactic going to look like in 5 years?
Well, hopefully we'll have built several more spaceships, and we'll have our Launcher 1 small satellite launch vehicle in operation. So we'll be launching hopefully a couple times a month to orbit, from this coast, and flying customers to space, every week.
What's sort of the projected once a week?
Yeah, hopefully more than that eventually. But you got to do it in increments.
Will that be out of New Mexico?
Yeah, it'll be out of New Mexico.
Are you going to fly the first flight?
For sure.
You and Sir Richard on the first flight?
Oh, I don't know I may not be on the first flight. I don't know where I'll fly. Richard will be on the first flight. That much we know.
What's JPL going to be like in 5 years, and will you have? Because you think 10 years out, don't you? What's going to be up in the? I would say up in the air, but it's past the air.
Yeah. No, look, I think obviously we will continue to do first-of-a-kind things. We're going to land on Mars in 2020 again, and we're hopefully going shortly after that. We'll be going to Europa, one of the moons of Jupiter, to go study that in more detail as a place that potentially could harbor life. But I see a different aspect as well. I mean, there's a lot of new space that's happening. Lots of small satellite companies that are talking about flying fleets of small satellites, the low-cost launchers. Not many people.
Asteroid missions. We didn't even talk about that.
Not many people realize that 1/3 of the work we do at JPL is actually Earth observation. It's not planetary work, and I see a great opportunity there for us to partner with these companies that are going to put a lot of satellites up. Put some of our instruments on there to give us a better view of what is going on the Earth. Better understand even your airships going across the Pacific. There's lots of instruments we could put on those. You're going to fly anyway. We might as well take data. And when you have these space hotels and things like that, we could have a few instruments on the lawn, so to speak, of the space hotel that help us study the Earth. So I think there's lots of opportunities for us to work, and I think it's a very exciting time, actually.
Do you think Elon Musk will get humans to Mars before NASA does?
That's a very difficult question. Look, Elon has announced he's going to go in 2018. We are
unmanned.
Yeah, unmanned, just to prove that he can land there. We're actually working with them from JPL. We have roughly a dozen people involved in helping them with the navigation and things like that. That's our job. We are supposed to transfer our know-how into industry. All the power to him. I'd much rather have him land things there so I can just put something inside his capsule and drive it out when we get there.
Very good. Jim, what is Aerojet Rocketdyne going to be like in 5 years?
Well, if all goes well, we'll be producing the AR-1. We'll be working on solar electric propulsion stages that we talked about. We'll be looking at nuclear propulsion for manned space as well, and also.
That would get you. That's really the way to get to Mars.
It's for man. It is. Mm-hmm. It's a lot quicker than solar electric.
Yeah.
And from a fuel perspective, it's more efficient now. And we're looking at low enriched, and it sounds almost oxymoron, but low enriched uranium and other things to be able to do that type of an application. So I think that you're going to continue. Also, by the way, we're working quite a bit on what we call green propellants, which are highly energetic propellants that are more environmentally friendly. So we're looking at the gambit of different things that prepare us for Mars, prepare us for more routine use of space for commercial and government applications, and hopefully we'll be propelling all of that.
And my understanding is a nuclear propellant gets you there faster, so there's less radiation exposure to the astronauts during the trips, the shorter trip.
Yes. In fact, a lot of people don't understand, but the Van Allen belt and some other places are pretty highly radiative, and the objective obviously is to get them there as quickly as possible.
Kelly?
We've been really fortunate. We've had double-digit growth over the last 3 years, and I hope that trend continues for the next 5 years. We've just embarked on our digital journey and buying 2 additive printers.
Like 3D printers?
The 3D printers, yes. So I think when I look at Ace Clearwater, our company will have totally transformed with the new technologies that exist today. And I'm hoping that the supply chain that we talked about, the ecosystem, will be as robust as it is today, if not better, because we like to say that without manufacturing, innovation is just a good idea.
And on that note, thank you guys very much. That was great.